Yes, everybody, hope you're all good. Welcome back. Thanks for joining me again here on YouTube. I'm back today to take you through my track Take Control featuring Fox, which came out last year on Kenzo's label Artikal Music. And yeah, let's get straight into it. So this is the arrangement for the track, as you can see here in Logic X. You're going to hear me use the word simple quite a lot today, because this really is one of the simplest tracks that I've ever made, and it just goes to show, like, you can keep things so simple, and it works when you get the elements right, and everything's kind of in balance. So the same as with the crack chimes tutorial that you might have already seen, that's here on my YouTube channel as well. This is the order in which I actually built the track. So I started with the synths, then started working on the drums and the sub, finishing up with some atmospherics, some sweeps, obviously the vocal, and some little bits and bobs, like strings and this siren that you hear me use a lot in my tracks. And as usual, I'm just going to walk you through the elements really, and show you how I made them. So the main element of this track is the synth line, which I'll just play a little bit for you now. And as I always do, I've split this into different tracks, which has different patterns on each track. For example, let me play you this little bit. And this little bit over here. And all I've done with these different tracks and different patterns is basically just layer things up so that it's kind of filling the frequency spectrum up. Because, like I said, it's quite a simple track, and this synth makes up a huge part of the track. So I'm just kind of trying to layer it, trying to spread it, keep things interesting really. And how did I actually make this synth? Well, if I just open up this pattern and get rid of these notes here and loop this for a second. So where did this sample come from? This sample actually came from a Kanye track. I can't remember for the life of me which track that actually was now, looking back, because I made this track so long ago. But it was literally the very start of the track. This synth came in on its own, and yeah, I just literally cut out about, you know, a second, brought it into the EXS sampler here in Logic, applied some effects, compressed it slightly, EQ'd it slightly, added a little bit of delay and reverb to give it some space, some kind of atmosphere within the track. I've drawn in the notes. I processed this sample in Audacity, a separate program. Some people say to me, why don't you just do that in Logic? But I've been using Audacity to actually process samples pretty much since I started producing, so it's just a way that I've kind of become accustomed to working really. But literally all I did was drag the Kanye track into Audacity, chop out that first second or so, which is that sound right there, and I've just given it a little bit of a fade on the beginning and end of that so that there's no clicks in the sound. And yeah, as I say, brought it into Logic, put it in the sampler, programmed the notes, added some effects, simple as that. So moving on, underneath the synth, the next part of the track is the kick sub. Now there's not actually a kick in this track at all, because when I was making it, I was trying to program a sub and then put a kick underneath that, and I just couldn't find a kick that would fit. You know, I did the usual thing of scrolling through folders of kick drums, trying loads out, none would work. So what I've actually done is I've just made this sub really punchy, so it sounds like a kick is actually in the track. So let me just play this pattern for you. And if I just show you what I've done inside the EXS, again using that word simple again, all I've done is selected a sine bass, and then I've turned on the envelope and added a pitch control to that. And if I just bring this back to no pitch setting, you'll hear that's literally just a plain sine wave. And what I've done is added this pitch on quite an extreme setting. And what that does, it's basically pitch diving as the note plays. And then what I'm doing is using this envelope down here in the ES2, which it basically controls how much pitch is being applied to the very beginning of each note. So if I kind of make this a little bit more extreme, then that's diving in a little bit of a ridiculous way. And if I take this right off again, all you've got is a dry sine wave. So with the right amount of pitch bend on the start of those notes, you know, it sounds like a kick leading straight into a sub, which is exactly what I was looking for. And there you have it. No need to use a kick, no need to try and make a kick fit into the track. The sub does all the work for you. And literally all I've done in terms of processing this is a little bit of EQ and the overdrive, which is a really important element of the sine, because obviously without the overdrive it's, you know, lacking in harmonics. You can barely even hear that, but add some overdrive and it just boosts that mid, boosts that top, and it just sounds so much better, so much cleaner, a lot warmer. And again, it's filling out the frequency spectrum, which is exactly what we want, especially when the track is so minimal. Underneath that, I've just got a layer which is just exactly the same as the layer that I've just showed you how I've processed, but just with a little bit of release on the end to stretch the note out, nice and easy. And what I've done as a lead into the drop, I've bounced that out that I just played for you, reversed it, EQ'd it slightly, and generated this. Which, yeah, it's just a lead into the drop really. I thought it sounded pretty cool, because basically you've got this rollout, and then as this rollout ends about there, this starts coming back in. So that fades out, and then this rolls in. So underneath the bass and the synths, we've got some drums. Let me play these hats and snares for you really quick. And in the way that I always work, which you'll be picking up on by now, what I do, I take one element and then I split it across tracks to apply different settings, different kind of processing. So I've got a reverse layer, a layer panned hard left, a layer panned hard right, different reverb settings for different snares across the track to kind of keep things interesting. And I'll just play these on their own so you can hear these. Made a little pattern. Same with the hats. I've split these again, and I've used this technique that I learned from a producer called MJ Cole, who I'm sure you've heard of, really wicked garage producer. And I was at a seminar that he did once in Manchester, a production seminar, And he was talking about how obviously when someone's playing drums in real life, they're hitting all the drums at different levels, different velocities every time. So when you're programming electronic music, it helps to split the velocities in a similar way. So what I've done, I've got two layers here. One's higher, one's lower in volume. Simple as that. Exact same processing. And yeah, it just kind of gives the track a little bit more movement instead of having all the drums literally flat volume all the way through. And you probably can't hear it too well on this mic, but if you listen to the actual track on YouTube Take Control, you should be able to hear that kind of movement within the hats. Aside from that, each of these is panned very slightly to the left and to the right. Underneath those, I've got this down sweep. Which I made outside of this project, just basically by time stretching some white noise and then filtering using EQ and some tremolo. Nothing too complicated there. I should just mention as well, a few of these sounds are in the producer pack, sample pack that I've released, volume 1 last year and the second volume last month. So if you want to get your hands on the downlifter, the siren that I use, some strings that I use, the atmospheres, and some of these sounds like the kick sub, and in fact this synth is in there as well actually, then grab the sample pack and these sounds are in there for you guys to use. Underneath that, I've added an atmosphere that you're probably not going to be able to hear too well on this recording, again because I'm using a mic here in the studio rather than recording the audio out. But this is basically just a recording outside a train station in Manchester that I took a few years ago, and that I use quite a lot in my tracks, just to kind of again fill out that frequency spectrum and just kind of take away some of the silence that is in the intro and the breakdown and the outro. Again, if you listen to this track properly on YouTube, you should be able to hear that in the intro and in the kind of quieter bits of the track. But yeah, all I've done with that again is just EQ'd it slightly to kind of leave bass for the lower elements of this track on the frequency spectrum. A spreader to widen it across the stereo field, and as always a little bit of reverb to give it some room within the track. Underneath all of that you've got the vocals, which I processed in a separate logic file, so you won't see any of the vocal processing inside this logic file, because I always find if you process vocals inside the logic file, then you just end up with an extra bloody 20-30 tracks of all the chops, and it just seems to make more sense to me to do the vocal processing in a separate logic file and then bounce that out, bring it into your track logic file, and it just makes things a little bit simpler, a bit easier to kind of work around.
Of a flavor for the river and the river one savor.
Have to give a massive shout to Fox every time. So underneath that, a couple of effects to glue the track together. Little bit of a sound effect. Again, pretty simple stuff that kind of just ties the intro and the sections together. Some strings towards the middle of the track that I'll play for you really quickly. again, just basically to tie the sections together, basically, is the reason that I tend to use them. And finally, this siren that I've pretty much been using it in every tune or every other tune in some way or another. And if I come off the editor, that's about it. So yeah, definitely one of the simpler tracks that I've made, but it works. So I hope you guys enjoyed this really quick tutorial. I know it was a lot quicker and simpler than the Crack Chimes one that I did, just because there's a lot less elements and a lot less processing, to be honest, as well. A lot of these elements, like the hats and the snare, have already been made outside of this Logic file. So basically what I've done when it came to making this track is pretty much drag and drop, because what I do is prepare the samples in advance. I mean, Producer Pack Volume 1, for example, that obviously you guys can buy now. Before you could buy that, that was just a packet of samples that I made for myself that I'd always have on the desktop to be able to draw on. Whenever I needed to kind of, you know, drag a snare in quickly or drag some hats in or so on and so forth. So a lot of those sounds, I mean, they all come from real tracks that I've made. So yeah, I hope that kind of give you some insight into how I put tracks together and the way that I kind of utilize different elements and the way that I process them to kind of put a track together. I don't really think there's any point talking about the structure, because you can pretty much work that out from listening to the track in full, to be honest. I mean, it's the usual kind of intro, drop, progression, breakdown, second drop, you know, blah, blah, blah. It's the same way that we pretty much all make music for DJs to play in the usual kind of mix format. But if you guys do have any questions, obviously hit the comments section. I'm more than happy to, you know, answer any questions or expand on anything that I might have missed on this video. If you've enjoyed watching this, hit the thumbs up button. If you haven't enjoyed this, hit the comment section, let me know why, and I'll try and do things differently for you guys in the future. And yeah, I'll have another one of these track deconstructions coming soon. I think I'm going to do one for the Not a Kick track that I made recently next, after that comes out on Medi in a couple of weeks. And yeah, thanks again for watching. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so that you're ready for when I upload more of these in the future. And I'll see you guys again soon.